Hi, I'm Jesse at Strobepro.com, and this is the Godox X3 touchscreen controller. This is a technological breakthrough in the Godox controller lineup. In this video, we're going to be going in depth into every menu, feature, and function that this controller has to offer. So follow along until the end or skip ahead to a specific part in the chapters below, and by the end, you're going to be an expert in everything to do with this controller. Let's get into it. We're going to unbox the X3 Sony version, but every camera version has the same things included in the box, and the X3 is available in Canon, Nikon, Sony, Fuji, Olympus, Panasonic, and Leica. If you are a Pentax shooter, unfortunately, this trigger will not be made in the Pentax version. So you get a really nice box with the controllers, like Godox has been doing lately, including the X Pro 2. And inside, you're going to notice that right away we get something unique, which is a case for a controller. That's never been done before in any of the other controllers. We just have basically one other thing in here, which is our USB charging cable, because this uses a lithium battery. And just in the bottom here, we have our manual. So now let's open this little case here and take a look at the actual trigger itself. It just pops out. It's form-fitted, which is really nice. And here you have the X3. You can see just how tiny this trigger is compared to my hand. So if you're a user who doesn't like the big bulky triggers up on the camera, then you're definitely going to enjoy the new X3. On the back here, we have a whole new Hotshoe mount. This is integrated right into the trigger, and gone are the wheels like you have on the older trigger or the flip lock. Now it's just simply a button that you push, releases the pin, and you can slide this in. I'll show you on a Sony camera in a minute, but it fits seamlessly in there. It looks like an OEM Sony product actually mounted to that camera. In addition to the touchscreen, which we have here, we also have a tactile wheel on the side and a power button, and also the flash triggering button. And then just on the back, we have our USB-C connection right here, which we'll use for charging and for firmware updates. So those are basically all the features on the outside. It's designed to be very minimalist. All the functionality comes from the touchscreen, which we'll get into in a couple minutes. Let's talk about a few of the features of the X3, and right away you can obviously see just how tiny this is. If you are an Apple Watch user, you'll definitely notice the design cues taken from the Apple Watch. It's about the same size, and then you have your same little tactile wheel on the side here. So this fits onto mirrorless cameras perfectly. You hardly even notice it. The other big breakthrough on this is Godox's first OLED color screen in a controller. So full color screen, high resolution, it's much better contrast as well. So you can easily adjust brightness for inside, or if you move outside, you can adjust it really easily as well, right off the touch screen. That being said, the touch screen itself is very responsive. It's quick to navigate from different groups. You can pull menus down. We'll go over all of that as well, but it's a first for Godox as well, introducing this highly responsive touchscreen. Now let's talk about battery life for a minute, because this is another big change from the other controllers, which all use AA batteries. Now we have a built-in lithium battery, and you charge this by plugging it into a USB-C cable. Now, Godox states that this has a 7-day standby time, which is a ton of time, and then usable time, they're saying 5 days shooting at 1,200 shots a day, roughly about 6,600 shots off of a charge on this. So ton of time to be using this controller, and it also recharges fully from dead in 2 hours. So if you're wondering, am I gonna have enough time during my shoot, you should be fully covered. And for those of you who are really worried, you can actually power this by plugging it in. It can charge and be in use at the same time. So that's really nice. You'll just see the display up at the top, the power level, that will blink. Or if you power it right down and plug it in, you'll get a big battery indicator showing you what state of charge you're in. So you should be fully covered for long shoots. You don't have to worry about that. So which controller should I buy? Do I go with the X3 or do I go with something a little less expensive? Let me show you the differences between the three current generation of Godox controllers. So the first one I want to show you is the Godox X2, and I will just mention we have dedicated videos on all of these controllers where we go fully in depth. This is just a quick little overview. But the reason why you would consider the X2 is because of this hot shoe up here. So I can have this mounted on my camera, plus I could stack a speedlight on top of that in the hot shoe. But more commonly, probably what you're going to use this for is a mixed light use scenario. That being where we have a number of Godox strobes already, which have built-in receivers, but I might have some older Alien Bees or Elinchrom lights, which use their own proprietary triggering system. I can take that other trigger for my Alien Bees, for example, stack it on top, and now I can fire all of my lights at the same time. I don't have to use optical slave, which isn't as efficient as the wireless. Other thing is, this is the least expensive. It's a fantastic value. So if you're only firing a couple of lights, you might want to consider this guy. One thing that it doesn't have in this one is going to be the TCM and individual zoom control and individual modeling lamp control. If you want those features, you're going to go up to the X Pro 2, which is the latest Pro offering from Godox. As I mentioned, this has TCM, which is a TTL to manual conversion. You basically just push the button and it'll convert those TTL settings into a manual power level. We can also go in here and have individual modeling lamp and individual zoom control on your speedlights. The other thing here is that you are going to have a big screen. And with that big screen, we have our group buttons laid out the side here. So we can just do a quick press, use the wheel to adjust that. It's really quick, easy, and we can get a lot of information on this big screen. So moving on to the X3, obviously the differences, which we already talked about before, is going to be the touch screen, just how small it is. And you can really start to see this because the X3 is literally smaller than the entire screen of the X Pro 2. But we are making a couple minor trade-offs for this. So we are going to lose that individual zoom control, but we do have individual modeling lamp control. So that's really nice to have on that. We are gaining the lithium battery. So if you like that, that's great. If you're, kind of old school, you prefer the security of just switching out AA batteries, and you don't want to be tied to charging this by plugging it in, then that's definitely something you do want to consider. The other big difference between the X3 and both of these controllers is that the X3 does not have Bluetooth control in it. So there is no Bluetooth transmitter. It won't be coming in the future. So just be aware of that. This cannot connect to the Godox apps. So you can't control this from your phone, for example, whereas both the X2 and the X Pro 2 have Bluetooth built in. You can easily connect and control things off your iPad or your phone. Another difference on the X2 and X Pro 2 is the AF assist beam. Now this is only used on older DSLR cameras, and it's quickly becoming obsolete for mirrorless cameras anyway, which is why you won't find it on the X3. At the end of the day, all of these controllers have the same core functions, so they will all support TTL, high-speed sync, plus you'll have multi-group control. Every controller will support a minimum of 5 individual groups as well. So it really just comes down to, obviously, those ergonomics that we talked about, some of the Bluetooth functionality, whether you want a hot shoe on the top, but otherwise, you're going to be able to control your lights the same on all of these. Let's talk about the new hot shoe for a second. Gone are the old wheels or flip locks. We just have this button here, which retracts the locking pin. And I have the Sony here. So yes, Sony users, it does have a metal hot shoe. All the other ones do as well, which is really good. It protects the pins or the electronic pins in the front of the Sony. And to put this on, basically just line it up on the hot shoe. It's going to kind of sit there for a second. It won't be able to go any further because the locking pin is there. Then just push the button and then slide it forward. Make sure it seeds all the way in there. And you can see right now just how seamless that looks. It looks OEM, as if Sony itself made it for this camera, which is really nice. I'm on an A7 III here, and literally I cannot tell the weight difference with this on or with it off. It's so light. so you don't have to worry about that. To take it off, you're just going to push that button and then pull back again. So hold it in and just pull back from the top. It'll pop off and we are ready to go. Let's talk about the physical buttons before we get into the menu. And if I hold this middle button right here, this will power on the unit. So you'll see it boot up there. This also functions as our main menu. So if I click it once, it brings the top menu down. Below that, we have our flash triggering button. This will test fire your flashes. And up top here, we have a tactile wheel. Although this is a fantastic touchscreen, if you want quick adjustments, you can use the tactile wheel to rotate through things. And it also serves as a button that you can click and make quick adjustments. I highly recommend the touchscreen, but it is there as a backup if you need it. Okay guys, we're ready to turn on the controller, and I just want to let you know that this is going to be a very in-depth walkthrough of every menu function in here. You can skip ahead if there's a specific thing you're looking for in the chapters below. But otherwise, this is going to be a complete overview. And I do want to mention we are using the X3 Sony version. So if you're using a Canon, Nikon, or Fuji, for example, there might be some minor differences, but I'll talk about those as we go. So let's go ahead and power on the unit. That's over here on the right. And if I hold that, you'll see the Godox light up and we have our display. So right off the bat, this display is actually completely new for Godox. This is an OLED. So you have much better contrast, much better resolution. It's a color display as well. Very nice, first time ever used in a controller. So for whatever reason, Godox is shipping these first units with the default language in Chinese. So we want to go ahead and I'm going to show you how to change that. And I'm going to be using this pen here, just a little bit easier so I don't have my hand and my fingers all over the screen there. But basically what you want to do, and I'm going to use the touch screen to do this, if you pull down here, if you are in Chinese language, click the setting right there on the bottom right, and you're going to scroll down to this little globe, click that, and just flip it over to English. And we can slide back. Now you see that everything is defaulted back to English. So we'll go from that point there. Now I'm going to show you with the touchscreen mainly, but there is side buttons here as well. So if you don't want to always be using touchscreen, that's no problem. So in its very basic function, what we need to do is the same as any other controller, is we need to set a group and a channel. So up here we have our group. We're indicated by A right there, and I can add additional groups. So right now I just have one displayed. I can hit this button and I can add in whatever groups I want, A, B, C, D, and we can go all the way. We can add 1 to 9 as well. We're just going to use letters. And one unique thing about this trigger is we can use TTL on all the way to group E. So that's really unique for this as well. Other controllers, some of them are only ABC for TTL. So to get back in a menu, all we do is just swipe from the side, and that's going to get us back to the main screen. And you can see we have B and C highlighted. You're just going to scroll, and if you have additional groups highlighted there, then you would just scroll down and grab them. So let's go ahead and set our channel now. We're on 21 up in the top, you can see, but let's pull down from the top, go into settings and into wireless right there. So I'm going to talk about scan for a second here. Just like on other controllers, you can hit the scan button, and what it's going to do is search for the best channel with the least amount of interference. So it's going to generate a list for you here. It takes about 15-20 seconds to do. You can see the little circle going around there. But something unique about this that you can't do on other controllers is we can directly apply whatever channel it finds here. So it found one of those. Let's go to 11, for example. We'll click 11, and you see it automatically applied. In the other controllers, it just gives you a list, and you have to manually go in and do it. But if you do want to do it manually, really easy, just scan wherever you want. You have 32 different channels. Here we have our ID as well. So if you're going to set an ID, This is kind of like a sub channel for the main channel if you were getting interference. Rarely would I recommend using this because it just creates confusion. If you don't put an ID on your light, then you can easily forget and it's not going to connect. So you see you can time out of the menu if you just leave it, and it's going to back all the way back to the main screen. But we can get in there again just by pulling down, going into settings again. And this wireless sync is a new thing that Godox is introducing. So it's going to be released in new firmware updates and all of their new lights, where you'll be able to go to the trigger here, click wireless sync, and then click a button on the actual light and it's going to automatically connect. It's not available right now for everything, but it will be coming, kind of like a WPS button on your router, just a quick way to easily connect. Okay, we have our channel set to 11 and our A, B, and C groups enabled. So now we can just click on an individual group and we can go in and select the mode first of all. So here the M is manual, then I have TTL, and I can flip back and forth really easily. This pause button over here pauses that group, so it basically disables it, it turns it off, if you're wondering what that does. So a quick and easy way to do that rather than the dashed lines in the previous controller. So to adjust the power, it's really easy. I can click the plus and minus individually, and that's going to adjust in third stops. I can also set that to 10th stops, which I'll show you in a minute. Or I can just grab the whole thing and slide it really fast. So that's super easy to do. Right now we're in manual, which gives us full control. I can switch to TTL though, and that gives us through the lens or automatic mode. This just enables your camera with the trigger and your flash to communicate with each other to produce an image that it thinks is basically neutral. So if you don't like that shot or the power level that the flash fired at, you do have some manual control in here as well, which is called exposure compensation. So I can add up to 3 stops of exposure compensation on the positive side, so that's making it brighter. And if I don't like what the camera came up with, I can also make it darker by going to -3 as well. And you can see I can tap or I can just drag again like we were doing in the other menu. But just a word of caution, this setting will be saved. So if you want to make sure you don't forget about the exposure compensation you put in there, just make sure you move it back to 0 and you'll be ready to shoot next time. If you don't want to use the touch screen to make adjustments, we also have the wheel right here on the side. It's a tactile wheel. It's a really nice feel to it. So I can rotate that wheel here, for example. I click the wheel in, that's my select button, and then I can just make adjustments as necessary. I click the button to lock them in, rotate down to wherever I want. The wheel is really nice if you want to make adjustments without going into the submenu, so I can just rotate quickly, make quick adjustments. But if you want to go into the submenu, then the only way to do that is to click it with the touch screen, and then you can go in for more individualized control. I can technically use the wheel in this menu as well, but there's really no reason to do it. It's much easier just to use the touch screen. I would really only use the wheel here on this screen for quickly adjusting power. Otherwise, I find the touch screen much faster. Let's take a look at how we can adjust all of our flash groups at the same time. I'm going to flip back to manual here. So you can see I have group A at full power 1/1 and B and C at 1/32. So if I go down here to the bottom, I have a plus and a minus. If I tap on that, I actually can't go any higher. That's telling me that that A group, when it shakes like that, is maxed out on its power, so I can't go any further. But if I want to reduce power, for example, I just want to take 1 stop off of all of my groups. It's easy to do. I can just use my minus button there, and you see this -1. I've taken 1 stop off, and I've maintained my ratios exactly. So all of them went to half power, or the top one went from full to half power and from 1/32 to 1/64, dropping a full stop on each group really easily. Now you can see I can go back up if I want, but again, it's going to cap out at that 1/1. And you see this little icon here, I added that 1 stop back in, and that's going to time out in a second. You'll see a little square once it's done, or you can tap it. So again, I can drag these if I want to do it really quickly. So I can just drag across all the way to the bottom, and it will cap out on the bottom as well. So 1256. And because my A group was higher, you see that I still have a little bit of room. We can also do this with TTL. So if I go in and I enable TTL, let's just enable it on all of them here just to show you the difference. So I have my +3 and -3 exposure compensation. So I can go either way really quickly, just dragging on the bottom there as well. But normally we would just put that back to 0 if we were done with it. You can also mix groups. So if I put that back to manual, say I want this one at manual as well. So you can mix manual and TTL, but the thing is you're not going to be able to maintain that ratio with the TTL. So we don't actually recommend using the all control when you have mixed TTL and manual groups. Let's talk about the modeling lamp control now. If I go into an individual group, we can see that it's not highlighted. So if I go and click that, you're going to see that it's asking us to turn the main modeling lamp switch on. I can do it right from there, but let me just show you where it is if you need to go in and do it manually. So if I pull the main menu down, the modeling lamp master switch is right there. That enables us to turn on and off individual modeling lamp in the group. So now if I click it, I have my full manual control on my modeling lamp. So from here, I can just click add, or I can drag it to do it really quick. Probably you're just going to leave it on 100% most of the time, but you can adjust it up and down. If I click the modeling lamp again, the little icon there, now we are in proportional mode. So depending on the light, not every light is enabled with this feature, so it is specific. Most of the newer lights have it. Proportional just means as I bring the power of the light up and down, then the power of that modeling lamp is going to adjust with it. So I would just be adjusting the power up here, and that would bring the power of the lamp up and down as well. Or if I click it one more time, then that's going to turn it off again. So let me just enable this and show you what that master control was doing. So now that I turned that on, you can see that we have modeling lamps under the A, B, and C, that little kind of sun. That means that the modeling lamp control is enabled. So in our A group, let's see, okay, we have the one that we just did here. It's also on for all of these, but let's say I want to turn this one off. So I can do that, not a problem. We're going, oh, clicked it too many times. There, that one's off. So you see the little symbol disappeared, and I know it's also on C, and we'll leave that one at 50%. That's no problem. But let's say I need to turn those modeling lamps off really quickly. I don't want to go over to the lights. That's no problem, and I don't have to go into each individual group. I just pull down from the menu, click this. Now all of them are turned off. You see the symbols are gone. If I want to turn them all back on again, it saved the settings where I had them before. Now they're all back on. You can see when I go back in, that one's at 100 where I left it, and the other one should be at 50. This controller is capable of controlling modeling lamps on all the newer Godox lights, but some of the older ones do not have this feature built into the actual light itself. So it's not a function of the controller, it is a function of the light. Anything new being released from Godox has it, all of the Pro series have it, and most of the new plug-in strobes have it as well. But if you've got a strobe that's 5-6 years old from Godox, it likely will not have that individual modeling lamp wireless control built in. Now that we open the top menu with our modeling lamp control, I'll just disable that here. Let's talk about the other buttons. So this one here is the beep function on all of your lights. So this either turns it on for all of them or turns them off. You can't go and actually individually control that. You see that there's nowhere to do that. It's just an all or nothing. If you don't want that recycling beep every time your speedlight or strobe recycles beeping at you, then I would highly recommend turning that off. Some people like it if your model is queuing off that beep, but the flashes now recycle so fast that it's just a constant annoyance. So I would recommend turning that off. Over here we have the lock setting. So if I turn that on, now nothing is going to interact with the screen. This is useful if you have someone else that's shooting with you, or you want to pass your camera off to someone without having them screw everything up that you've put in there. To disable that, again, just hold that for 2 seconds, just like it says, and then the lock is disabled. Then we have our custom functions in our settings. We're going to go over that in a minute. But the other thing we want to look at is multi-mode. So let's go into that now. Okay, right off the bat, I just want to quickly explain what multi-mode is. A lot of people get this confused. This is not to be confused with setting your camera to continuous high or continuous low and then blasting off a bunch of shots. People think multi, oh, I can just hold the trigger down and this is where I do that. No, this is actually used for capturing multiple, or basically capturing movement in a single frame. So for example, a dancer moving across a stage, if you're shooting skateboarding or something, someone doing a trick, the sequence of that trick in the one frame. And I also want to mention here that this is a control that is applied to all groups. You don't have individual control for this. So I can enable it on whatever groups I want. We know that in the main menu there, we have our 3 groups here, so A, B, and C. So when I go into multi, I can apply this to A, B, and C, and then any other ones that I might want to enable later on. So let's take a look at what we can do here. First of all, you're going to set your power, and the power is a direct correlation to the number of times that you can set this flash or a multi-burst. So at lower power levels, at 1256, I have the most amount of times that I can set, up to 100 there at 5 hertz. But let's say I moved my power level up to 1/16. Now you're going to see at those same settings, I'm limited on the top end to, what is it here, 20. I'm trying to scroll past and I can't get past 20. So it's directly correlated to the power level. So again, multi is always best used at lower power settings. So that's the number of flashes that I want to use. And then this is the number of hertz or the pulse of the burst. So I can set that as well. And you'll see that it corresponds as I adjust the power. Let's see what I can go up to. It's going to automatically adjust for me. So now it's saying I can only get 2 shots at quarter power. If I go back down, it's not going to actually bring that back down. It's only on the top end, so I would have to reset that back to, what was I at, 20 there. So again, guys, this is really just used for long exposures. So if I was to change this, for example, 20 hertz, let's go down to 10. That would mean that I need a 2-second exposure because I'm trying to get 20 flashes firing at 10 per second, so I need 2 seconds. So you would kind of play around with this depending what you're trying to light up. All of these settings can change. And again, we can enable it and disable it on each group down here at the bottom. And to get back out of that, I'm just going to pull from the top on the menu here. And I can just go back to my home setting. Oops, I click that. And there I am back in the main setting. Let's take a look at our custom functions. We can either hit the side button right here. That'll bring up our setting. Or if you're not going to do that, you just pull from the top, click settings. Now in wireless, we already went over this before, but we can set our channel in our ID here. Remember, if you're using ID, make sure that you put it on the strobe or the speed light as well. Otherwise, it's not going to communicate. We can run our scan, and we have our future button for wireless sync when Godox releases that new feature. If I go into sync, we have first curtain sync, so that will sync up to 1/250th of a second on most cameras. But if you want to shoot faster than that, you can enable high-speed sync. Now, this is going to allow us to shoot all the way up to 1/8000th of a second. Great for controlling ambient or high-speed motion in the frame. Some cameras do this a little bit differently. Canon, you can just access this directly in the menu. They communicate in crosstalk. But with Sony, Nikon, the others, you will need to actually go in here into settings, into sync, and leave high-speed sync on. Normally, I would just leave it on unless you're worried about rolling over your sync speed for whatever reason. Let's go to the shoot mode now, and I'll explain both of these options for you. So most of the time, you're going to want to leave this in the one shoot mode. So in this mode, the controller will only update the power settings when you make a change or hit the test button. This is only really a problem when you're sharing your lights with another shooter who has their own controller. That's where the all shoot mode comes in. In the all shoot mode, power settings are updated each time you hit the shutter button. This comes at a bit of a cost to battery life, but it ensures that you will always use the power settings displayed on your controller. So to make sense of this, if you're shooting by yourself, just keep it in one shoot mode or single shooter. And if you're shooting with a group of people, each one with their own controller, you want to make sure that everyone changes to the all shoot or group shoot mode. Next, we have auto off, and I have this disabled right now just for shooting this video. But if we were to turn that on, we can set this from 30 minutes all the way up to 90 minutes. So that's just if you were to forget this and pack it up in its case, it's going to automatically turn off rather than just drain the complete battery. So I would recommend leaving that on, and usually 30 minutes is fine unless you're at an event or something where you specifically need it not to automatically turn off. Moving down, we have our trigger distance. By default, it will be set from 1 to 100. And this is a great mode if you're outside and you have some space. So you don't have any walls or anything that trigger signal is going to be bouncing off. But in the studio, if you're close to your flashes, I would recommend switching to 0 to 30. This just prevents signal interference, and it's a much better mode for in your studio. So just to recap, 0 to 30 inside in the studio, 1 to 100 outside. So I'll just leave that in 0 to 30. Next, we have our step mode. And I mentioned earlier on that we can change our steps from third stops to 1/10 increments as well. So if I want to now go out to the main, you'll see here that when I adjust these, they're going in 1/10 increments, which is fine if you want like absolutely precise control, but it just requires 10 clicks between every stop if you're not going to use the slide. So normally I would just recommend leaving that set to 1/3 stops. And then you can set the actual minimum power depending on your light. So some lights will only go down to 1/128. Other, like the Pro series, like 8400, 8600 Pro, will go all the way down to 256. And other lights like the 80-1200 Pro will go down to 1/512. So if you're someone who doesn't like that fraction system, you can also go old school here, or like ProPhoto, for example, where you use the scale. So from 1 to 3. So I'll just set that there and then go back out to show you. Now you can see that this is going, no, not that mode. Let's go to this one here. So maximum is going to be at 10, and then minimum is going to be all the way down to 3. So if you've got some older Godox lights, or you just happen to like this scale better, then you can easily change that. Just remember, if you're using multiple lights, say one goes down to 1/128 like this, and the other goes to 1/256, you're going to be limited by that minimum light. It's going to stop on that one if you're using the all group control. Next, we have TCM. This is a TTL to manual conversion. So what that means is I can go into TTL mode here, take a shot, and I can automatically, by just going like this and changing to manual, convert that TTL power setting to a manual number here. So that can be useful, a quick way to kind of see what that TTL setting was at and just flip back and forth when TCM is enabled. The problem with leaving TCM enabled is that every time I would take a TTL shot and switch back to manual, it's going to change it. But if I just wanted it to stay, for example, all my manual settings at 1/32 here with TCM enabled, it could change it to anything it thinks, right? So you might switch over and then you see it's down to 1/28, and the next time you switch to manual, it's at half power. So that's why you only leave this enabled if you want that ability to switch from TTL to a manual power reading. Otherwise, you would just leave it off. And why it is also kind of not that useful is you have to set it for the specific lights. Here we have the 80-100 Pro all the way up to the 80-1200 Pro. And then we have a Speedlight setting, which would be like our TT685 and our V860s, for example, if you're using Speedlights. So again, to be completely accurate, I would have to go into the menu each time to select the TCM setting for each different light. So if I had an 80-100, I'd have to set it. Switch to the 80-400s, I have to set it each time. So that's why it can be kind of cumbersome and not that useful. Next, we have the zoom setting. And let me just explain this. This is only useful for Speedlights, so like the TT685, V1, V1 Pro, or V860. Auto is not really useful. You're never going to set it to auto because your Speedlight is going to be off camera. And when I'm talking about zoom, it's the diaphragm on the Speedlight. So when you adjust it, you'll hear it kind of creep in and out. That's either closing down that diaphragm to try to project the light beam as far as possible, or it's opening it up here like at 24 millimeters to make it as wide as possible to disperse the light. So if you were outside, for example, you'd probably just set this to 200 millimeters to try to push that zoom and get the light beam as far as possible. But this is a global setting, so this is going to apply to every Speedlight that you have once you enable that. So just be aware of that. One advantage of the X Pro 2 over the X3 is that it does give you individual zoom control on each group. So that is something to keep in mind when you're comparing these triggers. Next, we have the screen control, and this is actually quite useful on the OLED because you can actually see it now compared to older triggers. I can just drag that down, and you can see it does make a significant difference to the brightness. I would just recommend leaving it up. It's not really going to kill your battery too much. Here's standby. So we can set this to 15 seconds. And if I just leave it there, for example, what's going to happen is it's going to dim the screen out. For this video, I've just maxed it out to the 3 minutes because I don't want it turning on and off all the time. But this is a battery saver. I'd recommend you probably just leave it on to that 15 seconds, and you can see it dimmed it down there. So we'll just go back in and turn our screen back to the 3 minutes. Next, we have our language. We covered that right at the beginning of the video. That's just going to change from Chinese to English, and some of the early units are shipping defaulted to Chinese. Hopefully they change the North American ones to English by default. And then finally, we have reset. So if you have screwed something up and you cannot figure out what you did, you can go to factory reset here. Just click apply. That's going to default it back to its initial state right from the factory, and then that should fix any problems that you have. Here we have device info. In that menu, you're going to see the model, which is the X3 Sony, and the current firmware version, which is 1.06. So if you want to update the firmware, occasionally Godox does release firmware updates. You can plug in the USB-C cable, find all those updates on our website, and do that. I also want to mention that at the time of this firmware, these are all of the custom functions, but Godox does occasionally add them. So if you're looking at this video in a couple years from now, there might be some additional menu items, just so you're aware. One setting that you'll find if you're using another brand like Canon, Nikon, Fuji is the Legacy Hotshoe mode. Because we're using a Sony, it uses a different hot shoe with connections, so you don't have that available. But Legacy Hotshoe mode, what that allows you to do is enter single pin firing. And single pin firing, if you want to use that, you could put that trigger, even though it's, say, a Canon trigger, you could put it on like an old Minolta film camera or something, and it's just going to transmit just the firing signal through that center pin. You don't have to use the TTL connections. It will basically disable those. So you will lose TTL, you will lose high-speed sync when you go to Legacy Hotshoe mode. So there you have it. That's everything you need to know about the Godox X3 touchscreen controller. I just can't get over how cool this controller is. It's so tiny, fits seamlessly on my mirrorless camera here, and the touchscreen is super responsive. It's got tons of battery life, and all of the features that I know and love from previous controllers are all contained in this tiny controller. If you're in the market for purchasing a new controller, we'd love it if you consider Strobepro. A lot of users are concerned about Godox support for their products, and we've solved that at Strobepro, where we offer you a free 1-year warranty. That warranty is all done in-house, so we repair products here. Plus, our team of professional photographers are here to offer you phone and email support to get you through any situation that might arise. If you like this kind of content, please be sure to like and subscribe, and until next time, enjoy creating.